Bryan Hall, welcome to the CTO Studio.
Thank you.
Cue the jingle.
Well, I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see.
It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? What do you think of the name, the CTO Studio?
I like it. It's pretty fitting. You know, you've kind of got the place all decked out for it.
Kind of like Visual Studio, or?
Different studio. Although that gives it a whole nother meaning, I think.
Yeah, I think I thought I would want to have the name CTO in it so that we can identify, you know, sort of by CTOs, for CTOs, young and old.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't want to have it be sort of a boring name, so I almost didn't go with CTO in the title. I think I posted some questions in Slack, but I think CTO Studio works.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, the nice thing about keeping the CTO part in there is not that general developers wouldn't be interested, but we talk about things that are kind of later in your career a lot of times.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not
So
just that early stuff.
Yeah, it's both aspirational, it's both contemporary, it's current. So, but I do want to go back in time because you are.
I gotta do the sound effects.
Eric's not going to need any sound effects for this one. I'll never forget. So part of my story of the founding of 7 CTOs includes the early CTO dinners I had, the San Diego CTO Forum dinners. And you are one of the very, very few people who was at the very first dinner with Lisa Kennedy and myself in Old Town. And you were there.
That's right. Yeah, that was
2011, dude.
Small group. That was a small group.
12 people to be exact.
Yeah.
And we had a dinner at this little eclectic little Italian fusion place in Old Town. And you were there. So
it was awesome. I remember we used to do all those whiteboarding sessions, and we had just like thick tech talks. It was super fun. Yeah, that was really, really fun.
And at that point, you were the CTO, co-founder of, or founder of Embark.
Yes.
Which you eventually renamed into...
And that was early Embark, I think. That was really early.
Yeah, that's when you were still sort of thinking of a consolidated social media tool, right?
Yes.
Get tweeted and then respond in email or text.
Yeah, we built this platform where we made it really easy to bridge any two media platforms. Email, text, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And you could just message one and it would magically appear on the other.
So beautiful. Had you stuck with that, you could have now solved the problem of sharing music in Apple Music with people in Spotify.
Oh, there you go. That's right. I think that'd be popular. I think you could do that, especially with the lawyers. The lawyers love that.
I know. I really hate what's happened to music and social media.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So then so you're sort of a staple of the San Diego tech scene. Are you from San Diego?
No, I grew up in the Central Valley, and then I came down here and went to UCSD for college.
Is Central Valley where they grow vegetables?
Yes.
What's it called? The vegetable basin, or seriously, they grow a lot of vegetables in. It's called.
They do, yeah. So I mean, the area that I grew up in is mostly wine and grapes, but now there's lots of almonds and. I mean, there's tomatoes and stuff there too. But,
what town was that?
Madera.
Okay.
Right in the almost exact middle of the state.
Okay. So you came to UCSD and then you just stayed.
I stayed. Yeah, I loved San Diego. Loved being in a bigger place. It's hard to leave here for the weather. I think the first year I was here, I was on the beach in December, and man, that's tough to leave.
A very special place.
Yeah.
So you founded Embark. And if I understand this correctly, you actually recruited or went out and as the technical person, went out to find yourself a CEO? Is that
Yeah, I
right?
did. I actually went through the Founder Institute, and I started Embark with that idea in the Founder Institute. And then I actually met my co-founder, Al, in the Founder Institute. And he was working on a different idea. And about halfway through, I convinced him that he should come join me for what I was doing. And he thought it was a good idea. And we stuck together. It was a great part. It's been a great partnership.
When was that? Was that 2010, 2009 or?
Yeah, I think it was 2010.
Okay. Just off
yeah.
the bat, what advice would you have for a CTO with the idea, with the technology, with the chops to build it, and their desire to recruit a CEO? Like, what did you look for in a CEO that you ultimately found in your co-founder?
Yeah, there's a few things specifically. So I found somebody that I thought could outperform me in every single way at the CEO duties. So I originally really wanted to be the CEO of my company. I really wanted that, right? Like just from an ego perspective, that's what I wanted to do. I hadn't done it before. I'd done the tech side before, but and then I just saw Al be better than me at everything on that side. He pitched better. He talked better. Everything was better. I think vision-wise, we were, in the same ballpark, but everything else, people loved talking to him, and he loved talking to them, and investors were drawn to him. It was just like, this company has a much better chance of succeeding with him CEO than if I'm CEO.
Wow.
And even though I wanted to do it, it was a painful decision in the beginning, but it was.
I didn't realize that the vanity was, the force was so strong with you, man.
It was. Yeah, the force was strong with me. It definitely was. So I think that's one big thing. And he also was just a crazy hard worker. Like, he just works super, super hard. And then the last thing, I think the thing that really kind of sealed it for me is when we sat down. So Founder Institute had this great framework to try to help us. How do you negotiate if you want to join forces with someone? And there was 5 different ways they recommended. We kind of did them all. But we had these very frank discussions about what's your value versus my value, and what does that mean in equity over time. And there was never.
Was that the framework from Founder Institute? Or?
But yeah, so a bunch of the mentors had these different ideas, and Al kind of collapsed them all into this. I don't know if we've ever shown it to you. We have this spreadsheet of how you evaluate each other and value. We should share that sometime with the group. It'd be helpful. But so then we just went through all these metrics. Here's what I bring on all these different variables, and here's what you bring. And I would say what I think his value was, and he'd say what he thought my value was. And it was never a contentious discussion. It was just matter of fact. And we got through it, I think, in 2 or 3 days. And I think this thing that could have been, political and disastrous and difficult, and it just was
unspoken.
It was a non-issue.
And I guess surviving, there's so many relational nuances involved in that type of conversation that if you can survive that conversation, that's a good sign.
Absolutely. And then there's one other thing that we did, which was really important, was that we both had vesting schedules, and we both had if this doesn't work out 12 months from now, what does that look like? We just did that up front. So we always knew, if it didn't work, we knew what it would be like, and we knew what we expected of each other. So I think there just was never this nebulous unknown. It was just all kind of laid out. That was helpful.
But there was still that feeling of that relational risk, right? I mean,
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And the main thing was we wanted to make sure the relational risk wasn't a risk to the company itself, right? So that's why we had the vesting schedules and the cliffs.
Was it weird to participate in a vesting schedule for your own idea? I mean, that must have been hit hard.
It sounds weird, but it's the right thing, right? Because the intention was always to build something scalable that we could go raise money for. And if you're going to do that, you have to stick around. And if I just have all the equity, we're going to have to change that later. And that's where I think things like that are things where I think Founder Institute helped a lot, because they're well, this is what's going to look like to an investor 18 months from now, right? So just do it now.
And the Founder Institute is still around?
Yeah, they're doing really well.
And
I think they're in, I don't know, 90 cities or something now. They're international.
And just quickly, their model, they take a piece of the pie, right?
Yes.
A small piece of the pie.
Yes, and they do something interesting where they take a piece of the pie, which is shared by both your cohort of companies, so the ones that go through with you, they all get a piece of your company, which is great. And then the mentors do too, and then the Founder Institute does. So it's kind of nice because everyone's interests are all aligned.
And so fast forward, you did sell that company. We'll get into Email Copilot, but you sold it. So they all got their payday?
Yeah.
Rock and roll.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome.
I had a brief brush with them, and I was very impressed. I mean, they told me to never show up and ever come to any of their events ever again. But I enjoyed it while it lasted.
Yeah, no, they've been very good. We also went through Techstars, but I would say like the Founder Institute was this great, almost like school education on what it is to make a startup. And here's all the knowledge, all the building blocks that you need. I wasn't ready for some of the lessons, but they were there. And the ones I was ready for, I took advantage of. And the ones that I wasn't ready for, I revisited later, and they made sense to me.
Is it curriculum based, or is it mostly mentorship based?
It's very curriculum based.
That's amazing.
So every week they have a focus for what you're doing. You have homework to do. You do that stuff, and then the next week you show it to mentors, you show it to your peers, and you're judged on what you do.
And it's in the context of a company that you go to them with the company you're trying to start.
Many people do, especially now. Back when I went through, it was common that you went with just a bunch of ideas. You don't really know what you're going to do. That's kind of where I was. I had some good ideas, and I kind of had the blocks of what I wanted to do. But many people formulated in the first few weeks, kind of they locked into what they do. But by the time you're done, you are incorporated and you're off to the races. Oh. So,
yeah, I was just talking to someone this week about how it's a shame in a way. We were talking actually about the various startup weeks that exist, and just how, in a way, there's a rah-rah vibe around, I want to start a company, and everyone high-fives you, and that 2% risk that you took gets rewarded highly by sort of social acceptance. And I mean, I know it sounds a bit harsh, but the idea that you go into a pragmatic sort of schooling of, hey, I want to start this company, but holy moly's, I need to go to school.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Founder Institute does that.
It does. It very much does. And I kind of had it pointed out to me because I'd started a company before Founder Institute that did okay. And it was engineering services to start with. And then we built embedded Bluetooth modules after that. But after 7 years, I just had done okay. And my co-founder and I, we decided to shut the company down. And the last day, like the day we're just like clearing our stuff out, we were subletting an office. And the guy came to visit the guy who owned the building, who was supposed to be there that day. And he just saw us and asked what we were doing. And we said, is business closing the business down. And he said, well, I do a lot of entrepreneurship. Like, just tell me, like, briefly what's going on. And we told him. And in 30 minutes, he said, here's all the things you did wrong. Here's how you could actually sell the assets that you have now. Like, in 30 minutes, he listened to our story and told us something we could do to change our outcome tremendously. And it struck me like, my God, this guy has learned how to do this way better than I did. He knows more about my business than I did after 7 years, and he listened to me for 30 minutes. So I realized, like, wait a minute, you can get good at this, and I should go educate myself instead of just banging my head on the wall.
I love it. Yeah. And we should definitely link to some of this in the show notes. Get more people involved in that.
Yeah, I was always this person that would just put my head down and go figure it out myself. And that's a really bad strategy for many, many things. And entrepreneurship is one of those things. You should not do that. People are super willing to help. Reach out, get mentors. If there's something you don't know, find somebody that does and get to know them.
So are you mentoring in Founder Institute?
Yeah, I mentor in Founder Institute. I also connect with companies through Techstars, and then also just kind of directly, independently.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you did the pivot, I'm assuming it was a pivot from all social channels to specifically email, right? And you went into the email deliverability space.
Yes.
So I'd love to know, as CTO, I know that as co-founders, we have to look at our product and say, okay, we're learning, and so we have to pivot. But I can imagine that as CTO, it wasn't just a natural tech stack migration. That you had to go from managing social channels and all the various APIs and platforms to now being in sort of high velocity, high volume data processing for this little thing called emails.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of interesting. I mean, we had been, when we got into Techstars, we actually went to Techstars with that original idea of the social thing. And when we got to Techstars, the mentors in Techstars helped us understand very quickly that was not going to fly for a big kind of growth business. And the reason just was, there's 5 platform companies that do well. They're like Microsoft and companies like that. So it was just an unlikely play. So we knew we had to make the business pivot. And once we figured out what that was going to be, from a platform point of view, actually, I had this when I was doing the embedded stuff. The embedded world was changing, and I realized I needed to move from the embedded space to another space, and I chose the cloud space. So that company always started as a way for me to retool in addition to solving a problem and being an entrepreneur in a different space. So I was always, the intention was always to retool to cloud machine learning data. And when we needed to pivot to something else and email became that thing, it was actually joyous in a way because it was even better because now the volume was going to be really high. There were great data science problems to solve. So for me, the pivot was like even a better validation of where I wanted to go.
So technically,
in general.
Okay, so technically it was sort of consistent with where you wanted to go.
Yeah, I was always trying to aim, like I knew long term that the world was going this way. And so I was always trying to aim myself technically like back in that direction.
And so your pitch, your customer then changed to pitching email deliverability companies. Is that?
So we didn't start with deliverability. We actually started with optimization. So the original idea was if we can see email data, then we can help people to do better. We can help good senders do better in the inbox, right? And the way we do better in the inbox is by watching people's behavior and kind of getting that email to you. Like, right, when you're going to check your mail, that email shows up. Boop. It's at the top. You go read it. And we validated very quickly that that's a really strong effect. Turns out that's a very hard data problem to solve well. So it took some time. But that was the original thing. That was great, but we had a go-to-market issue. So we solved that problem and built it. But go-to-market, which is a part of the entrepreneurship side that we really hadn't dealt with that much, was very challenging because you had to partner with the people making these email platforms in order to sell that product. Deliverability was better because you could go to individual companies that had deliverability issues and give them tooling to solve those problems.
And help me define deliverability problems because it's not just bouncing emails, right?
No, it's email is a really old technology, right? So there's everything from infrastructure problems. Your DNS entries are wrong or got broken by somebody that changed something. There's reputation that's involved from a handful of different companies. So if your reputation starts to suffer, it's not obvious until it's a critical problem. And then if you're a big company, you have lots of different people sending lots of different kinds of mail, and you're judged these days in real time by Google and Yahoo and everyone about the quality of your mail. So they want to make sure that their customers are having a good experience. So there's really this really complex topology of things. So what we did is we watched kind of all the data going on across your infrastructure and your sends and your interaction with people to look for these kind of more subtle problems to try to help you know early on, 2% of your mail is not doing well in Google all of a sudden. And it's this new thing that this new marketer started sending out that's causing you the issue. So they could stop that and they can nip it in the bud before it became a problem.
And is it when you analyze email headers or the email content?
So it was the bulk of the deliverability stuff was not the email content. It was what's actually going on with this message. So we watched like every message to every person, and we'd know that we'd even see the responses from like Google and Yahoo and Outlook, and we'd see those responses as well. So we knew what Google and Microsoft and Yahoo thought of the mail, and then we knew about what the receiver thought of the mail, and then we could help you like tune and figure out if you were having problems.
And is that sort of scoring what they thought of the mail? Is that encapsulated in the email header?
It's not. It's from a bunch of subtle signals. So the way the servers talk to each other, they send each other information about what's going on, but it's different depending on whose server it is and what's going on with it.
And of course you had to...
So that's where the data science comes in. You're watching these streams of cryptic, not apparent data, and you're looking for the patterns in that data to know what's happening. And that part was really, really fun from a data science problem. The part that was less fun about that as a business was that there were all these good actors, which I loved, and it was fun to help. And then we always had bad actors trying to use our stuff too that you had to keep away, right? Like, I wasn't interested in helping anyone that wants to be in your inbox that you don't want there, right? We just wanted to help the people that you like the mail that they send you. That was very difficult.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I was involved in a startup that wanted to make a run for sort of email tagging and sort of a new way to search your inbox. It's sort of through maintaining some context. But it's funny, and this was in 2014, 15, and it was right when Slack was starting, I don't forget when that was, but Slack was starting to gain some real momentum. And I just constantly got this whole email is dead, email is dead, email is dead. Why are you building a startup that is tagging emails? And I just keep on thinking that email ain't going nowhere, man.
Yeah.
Email.
Yeah, it's very true. And we had the same thing when we were originally pitching the idea. Everyone would say, "Well, isn't email dying?" And all the numbers for email just go up, 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 up. The amount of commerce driven on email just continues to go up, and it just has this place in our lives of this repository of things that have this longer term kind of state. And there's certain things that we want to be communicated to. It feels more comfortable that way, where Slack would not feel natural or texting would not feel natural. And you see, like, really Google and Microsoft innovate on email a lot too. So, now when I get an email from Alaska Airlines when I'm flying, Google picks it up out of my email and kind of puts it in my little task list. And so they're extending the utility of email. You remember email did almost die, like when it was getting crushed under the weight of spam, right? And then Gmail fixed it enough for everyone to like kind of stay in the game.
It's interesting how many Gmail. I mean, I have people when they now share email addresses on the phone and stuff, they'll even omit the @gmail.com because it's now assumed that it's a Gmail account.
Yeah.
That's quite a coup, isn't it?
It is very much.
If you think about how the Chrome browser, just suddenly everyone was using Chrome.
Yeah.
Email, everyone using email. G Suite, everyone it's just crazy, man.
Well, and in the data world today, they have all the knowledge out of search and all the knowledge out of Gmail and all those things, and that's a big property. I mean, all these big companies, Microsoft does the same thing where they bought LinkedIn so they'd have that data exclusive, and that's becoming the game. Really, is who owns what data.
Do you think that the G in Google is for Ghost in the Machine?
It might just be for Google.
So as far as but when you built Email Copilot, you were in the Microsoft stack and the Microsoft cloud, right?
Yeah, and this was really early. I mean, this is probably 8 years ago that we started, something like that. So quite a while ago, and it was when Azure was, the paint was not dry at all.
Did you choose them because they gave you free credits, or?
No, I chose them because I had been doing development on the Microsoft stack for a long time. Even all my embedded stuff was in Microsoft land. So that was the place I was most comfortable. And since I was retooling, I just started there. But it's actually been a really good thing. When I was doing embedded stuff, I did a bunch on Microsoft embedded OSs, and that didn't pan out very well, obviously. But on the cloud side, they're killing it. Like, they're doing really, really well. And they've been behind Amazon, but really it's not fair to say, but it's still a lot of a two-horse race. Google's getting involved more, but Amazon and Microsoft are just way, way, way ahead. And now with Seismic, actually, we're doing a ton of AI and machine learning kind of on the edge of the tooling. Kind of we're right up at the edge. And Microsoft is amazingly helpful. We're all Microsoft stack there, and they give us a lot of very, very velvet glove treatment and help because they really want to support enterprise companies that are doing a lot of AI and ML work.
Yeah, so
that's a big part of the future.
So that takes us to your exit. You sold to Seismic.
Yeah.
You had a two-way sale there, which we don't have to get into, but
yeah, we sold the tech and product off to an email company. Seismic's not big in email, so we wanted the technology to go someplace where it could be loved and used and appreciated, and make good things happen. And then we, as the team, went to Seismic.
Okay, so and are you still fueling support calls for?
No. Yeah, that's all transferred. We had about it was really a year in total, but mostly 6 months or so of heavy help with the team there, just kind of getting everything up and running.
What was your tech due diligence like? What was that process like for you? Because I mean, you were speaking to quite a few potential suitors and a deal going. I guess the tech due diligence for the technology was very different. I mean, you didn't have to do any due diligence for the acqui-hire, right?
We kind of did both. The due diligence for the acqui-hire part was not diligence on the product we'd built so much as talking about how our team would plug in to their company and what we thought it would look like for the first year or two and the kinds of things they were looking for and what our vision was for how we deliver those things. That was super fun. And that's actually a lot of what helped us make the decision about where to go. We talked to lots of companies on that side because the proven data teams are in high demand, right? So that part was really fun. But when we talked to the guys at Seismic, it was such a natural just collaboration and design with the executive team there. It was really, really fun. So you could imagine working with these people for a long time. So that part was really great. And then the diligence on the other side, the product side, that was much heavier, going through nitty gritty, deep into the code and data and how we solved the problems and why we did things the way we did. Spent a lot of time with their data science team and their development team, both. And then over the next 6 months after the sale, we had a lot of, I think it was like half time for a bunch of that with them to kind of get that up and running.
So Seismic, what is Seismic? So this is your full-time job now as a principal
architect for data and analytics.
And so Seismic does what? And then your primary role is what?
Yeah, Seismic is a solution for sales enablement. What that means is big companies, they have marketing departments and sales departments, and the marketing departments make all the sales collateral and presentations and all of that for the sales team. And then the sales team uses that material to go out and sell product. So what we do is the system we provide kind of handles all of the content for these companies. We help them make the content. We help them deliver the content. For financial services companies, we help them do auditing and usage trails on the content. And then the salespeople use our platform to find that content and deliver it to their leads. So they can do presentations in our software. We do like live assembly of these things. We help them know like which pieces of content are working well. We help the salespeople with it to know what the best salespeople are doing, what other people on their team are doing, kind of how that works. And then for the marketer, they get to see like how's their content doing? Is it being used? Where is it being used? And how is it being used? So we kind of manage all that for them. And some of these big companies, there's tens of thousands of documents.
Well, that's what I'm just realizing. And also the team sizes. It's not like you're getting together in a room once a week.
Right.
You're spread out.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And so as principal architect and sort of data scientist, are you, what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, I still proudly spend about 50% of my time writing code, which I love very, very much. Yeah, you have to keep fighting to keep making that happen.
So while we're talking about that, then what you're writing code in what?
So most of our system is .NET. So most of the code that I write is C#. Our data scientists mostly work in Python. We have a little bit of other things like Clojure and, obviously there's front-end JavaScript-y kind of stuff. But my team mostly is behind the API layer. So we're mostly .NET and then algorithms in Python.
And on Azure, what services are you using on Azure for people who are sort of want to know?
Yeah, so it's different for my team than a bunch of the company.
Let's talk about your team.
Yeah, so my team, we deploy almost everything to Service Fabric. So we're doing microservices. A lot of it is implemented as both stateful and stateless services in Service Fabric, and then APIs as well. The nice thing about Service Fabric is we have a cluster of machines that we can get really good utilization on, and we can deploy a lot of applications into that same cluster and get reuse and reliability. It's been just rock solid. Microsoft's built a bunch of their big products like Outlook and stuff on top of Service Fabric. So it's got a lot of miles on it. It's been really helpful.
And for people who are in AWS, what is that comparable to?
That would be comparable to,
EC2 or?
No. So there's some open source frameworks that do the same thing. There's not really, Amazon doesn't really have a product for that. What people do in
SOA
Amazon, they'll do like Lambdas, but that's kind of a smaller level of granularity. Service Fabric is more like write this whole app and deploy it. Like we write our entire API and we deploy that as a single package. So it's different than a Lambda. But if you thought about like a bunch of Lambdas orchestrated together and deploying that, and then you managing a cluster of machines around
so it's a service that they provide that's focused on microservice architectures.
Yes,
right?
yes, and it's just Microsoft's flavor of that, and it makes it really easy, like deploying .NET applications into it.
I wonder if it's. Have you heard of Beanstalk?
Yeah, Beanstalk is very similar.
Probably something
Right.
like that.
Exactly.
So a couple months ago, you did a talk at 0111 CTO conference, and you did a talk on sort of the no buzzwords edition of what data science is and how it could be used. And you gave a fascinating, the theme throughout your talk was being able to ask good questions.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that a little bit in the context of I'm a CTO, I feel like I'm getting all this data, my app is running, and now I'm starting to hear the words analytics more, and of course the dreaded AI, machine learning language is being used more and more around me.
Yeah.
What do I do as a CTO if I want to get into that space, and what do I tell my C-suite about what is possible and what is not possible?
Yeah, I think a really good thing, it can be very difficult when people in the C-suite start getting pressures from the outside about you guys have to have a story about analytics and data and machine learning, and they might typically, they're going to pressure the tech team to do something which is probably not the right thing. So the first thing is to kind of like be able to step back and take a breath and connect with some people that are in the same situation or that are ahead of you. And what you really want to do is figure out, I like that you brought up the idea of questions, because if you can figure out what questions you want to answer with your data, you're starting with the right frame of mind. A lot of times what people do is they just start collecting all the data and they write it all down, but the context is bad, the data's dirty, it's just not in a form that's very usable. If you've ever done any science, if you design a study where you're collecting data, you have to have an ethogram for how you code the data and what questions the data can answer. And you need to do the same thing here with data science. If you don't do that, you might be collecting a bunch of worthless data. You've got data, but there's no good stories in it. And if there's no good stories in it, you can't learn anything from it. So it's really important up front to think about what those questions are.
So that might be, as a CTO, that might be a great conversation that you can help facilitate in the C-suite.
Yeah, and just doing that education process of really helping them understand that just having the data doesn't mean anything. You know, we talked about this as an example from like mining, like, right? If I have a bunch of land, but there's no gold in the ground, like I can mine all I want and I can have as much land as I want, but there's no value there still. So, trying to help them understand that we need to figure out what questions we want to answer, what questions have value to our business. And a lot of times the rest of the C-suite really has a good picture of that. But trying to help them understand that if you can do that, then you can figure out whether you have gold in the ground or not in your data. And you can make sure you get data that does have those stories there. They're going to be able to have that value.
So I love that. I love that analogy of, if there's no gold in the ground. I mean, sometimes you don't know if there's gold in the ground. So you just buy the plot of land just in case.
Right. Well, and that's where people get stuck, right? They're like, well, we just got to write it all down just in case. But you end up spending all your time writing it all down and no time actually figuring out whether there's anything there. And you're better off, kind of like the lean startup idea, right? Let's reduce the risk up front. And you reduce the risk up front by knowing what questions you want to answer. And then a human being can look at the data and go, oh yeah, the story's in there. Like I see it.
I feel like as tech people, we all have sort of this hoarding mentality because of log files.
Yeah.
And it's almost like
Splunk, like
and Splunk,
$3 billion Splunk, like just track it all, baby. Just write it all down.
Yeah, it's like when you have records in a database that a user can supposedly delete, and you don't actually delete that record, you just flag it as deleted.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the mentality that we have, is like, let's just keep everything in case.
Yeah, and it's funny when you start talking to data scientists that are doing this for like Google and Amazon, like on these really good teams, it's not about the size of the data, it's about the fidelity of the data. You know, we in that talk I showed this one picture where there was a message in the image, and when it was high contrast, that's what you want, right? So it's really about that contrast of the data to see the story, and that's, you know, even at these really big companies, they have big data, but only because they have so many customers, right? That for them, it's really about like, let's make sure the story is really clean in our data.
Yeah, because if you think about it, the more data you gather senselessly or with that what if mentality, the more noise you have.
Yeah, you end up with a needle in the haystack, right? It's better off to have the needle with 2 other needles or 3 pieces of hay than a giant pile of hay with a needle in the middle of it somewhere.
So I want to ask you sort of 2 things. One is about the discipline and the other one's about hiring. So can you contrast for me just what data science is and what machine learning is?
Yeah, I mean, there's
in today's context. I know I know everyone's using those things interchangeably, I think, these days. And then I want to ask you about hiring. How are you? You know, Seismic is obviously, you guys are, you know, growing and you're having to build your team. Like, how are you hiring for these various sort of data sciencey positions? Like, what are you doing to attract people to Seismic? So if we could sort of start with the one and move into the other one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's somewhat a fuzzy border as you move. It's actually funny, when we were first raising money for Email Copilot, our lead investor and some of the other investors were like, hey, a bunch of my portfolio companies are doing all this super advanced AI machine learning stuff. You got to go talk to them. Because I kept telling them, hey, we're going to do what we do with statistics mostly. Like, there's some advanced techniques, but it's mostly statistics, linear regression and things like that. And they're like, no, you got to do this advanced AI. They're all doing it. And to a man, to a person, every CTO I talked to said, no, it's not marketing hype, but they want to think it's these advanced, you know, robot in the box things. We're doing statistics, right? And I think most of your low-hanging fruit is actually statistics. So a big part of the data science is understanding what is out there in the realm of like already known algorithms, everything from kind of linear regression at the kind of simplest, most basic, up through a bunch of machine learning techniques. And then knowing when we're looking for certain types of patterns, what things are pretty applicable. Like that's the real kind of magic of it, right? Like my job on the team and a bunch of our developers' jobs is we get the data in, we get it clean, we make it safe, we put everything to rest in this great way and kind of prepare that fertile ground with gold in it for the data science team. So it's really easy for them to mine it, right? They're the ones who are mining it. Like they're looking for the best way to get down to the gold and get the gold out and, you know, present it up. So there's this fuzzy border between, like, when people talk about data scientists a lot, they do mean these people that go and get the data and clean it and make sure you have the right data, as well as the first part of the analysis. And then when they talk about the machine learning, it's kind of the more advanced, you know, algorithms that people are using to extract some of the higher value. But the problem is, if you start with that higher, more advanced value side, not only do you have this maybe haystack of crazy data you don't need, but then you're throwing algorithms at it that don't know what they're looking for either. So you kind of go stepwise, kind of up the chain. Like we at Seismic, you know, we kind of, once the data was in and clean, we started cutting all the low-hanging fruit out that we could get with these simpler algorithms. And now we're to, you know, individual tenant models that are trained for very specific things for each customer. But you kind of walk up that chain. So my view of data science versus that kind of machine learning is, data science is kind of all the data's in, it's clean, you're doing all the statistics stuff. And then once you're stepping up to actual kind of more machine learning models, it kind of hits that next level, which is even harder because now you have 500 complex different algorithms and you need to know which ones are applicable for which circumstances, which ones will give you the right kind of analysis out. Because really what we're doing is we're taking this knowledge that's in these stories and we're distilling it out into insights that our customers can use to save time, save money, do better, right? Like be more efficient. That's really what it is. It's, we're trying to put a bunch of information in and get knowledge out the other side.
Yeah, I heard an interesting conversation around when a software engineer needs to test their code, or deploy their code. They basically write their tests, and then the CI will take care of sort of deploying it, and then they'll know instantly whether something worked or didn't work. Whereas with data scientists, you have transforms or whatever you call it, that or I don't know what you call it, but whatever you deploy needs to now run on data for potentially days. Maybe we had this conversation about or weeks, and so you don't know whether any changes you submitted, whether that worked or not.
Yeah, so that's actually a big thing. So this is actually one of the things I think that's most challenging about my job, maybe the most fun, is that what the problem you just described is the current state of the art of deploying machine learning and data science in production. And no one really knows how to solve this problem in a great way. So it's fun because we're all trying to figure out what's the right data patterns, flow patterns, compute patterns, deploy patterns for these things. We do everything in real time. So like when the data science team is working on a new algorithm, they'll take history and they'll run the algorithm against history, and they'll decide what they think fitness means, right? So let's say, for instance, we do a lot of stuff around search. So we want to help the salespeople find the documents they're looking for faster, right? So what they'll do is they'll actually look at history, and they'll come up with a new algorithm that they think would do a better job, and they'll try to judge based on what people did in history whether they think this new function will do better. And then we have the ability to release that live into the product, and we have an experimental framework that lets you test that version against the previous version. And we know how many searches and results from search we need to get in order to decide if that one was better or worse. And you have to be able to like run against history so you learn fast and you test fast, and then deploy it into the world to see if it really works. So if you tried 50 ideas on history and you found one that worked, and then you put 50 of those out in the field, you'd have like maybe 5 that were good, right? But you have to have this process of doing it and doing it reliably. And if you can't close the loop on the results of what happened, you're nowhere. But you can't learn very quickly. People get mired in superstitious behavior, right? They when human beings look and decide whether it was good or bad, that's not going to pan out. Like, it's not going to work.
I just as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing that I think when I hear data science, I focus on the data side of it, and not realizing that really it's the science.
It's the science, right? And this whole process is all an experiment. Everything we do is an experiment, because we're trying to like distill, get knowledge, provide that knowledge to someone as a recommendation, and we have to watch them take action on it. Did they take action? And then did it help them, or did it hurt them, or did it do nothing, right? And that's the discipline of like looking at the results. That's also the part that most companies, they just never get there. They don't get to that part.
So just as we wrap up, the CTO who is looking at hiring their first sort of data science team, in other words, probably their first person on the team.
Yeah.
Any recommendations on where to look for them, or things to keep in mind when interviewing these types of people?
Yeah, the first thing is to make sure that they're actually ready to hire a data scientist, and you're not ready until all your data is super clean. You have dashboards and statistics where you can see any number, any time for any view. Everyone in your company can basically see whatever data they want to see. Not heavy analysis on it, but the basics. I can look at all the numbers. If you can't do that yet, you should not hire a data scientist.
They're valuable.
Yeah. And then
in other words, don't hire a data scientist to do that for you.
No, because they will fail miserably. Most data scientists do not know how to make something in production. So you need, for instance, my data scientists are awesome, but what I've set up for them is a cluster of machines in Kubernetes. They make a new algorithm that has a very well-defined REST API on it, which is the same for every service. I put it in the Kubernetes cluster, and then I have an API that's the only thing in the world that can actually call their code. So I know if it's up, if it's down, how it's doing. So I can plug their algorithms in now without them being responsible for production quality, reliability, all that's just on the development team that already knows how to do it, right? So you need to set them up for success. So if you're ready to do that, then to my mind, you want to find a data scientist that has as much experience dealing with real world, dirty, crazy problems and getting insights from them as possible. So for instance, when we were looking for our first data scientist, we interviewed PhDs and professors and all these people that had done tons of academic machine learning work, but it was all in contrived data sets. And we ended up hiring a guy that had doing work with submarine sonar data for the Navy, like the dirtiest, craziest data you could imagine, and gotten real good insights from it. And just the flexibility of thinking that requires was really, really important.
So just quickly to dig into that, what is the differentiation that you're saying the ability you say there's more of an expanded way of thinking about data?
Yeah, so one test that we did that kind of separated the wheat from the chaff, which was really good, is we made a data set that was fake data, that was dirty. And when people would come in, we would do a quick kind of screeny kind of interview. And then if that went well, we'd say, okay, here's a data set. Go off and come back in a week. And I'm not expecting you to put in a giant amount of time, but put in a few hours and come back and show us what you learned. And half the people would never come back, right? Even people super qualified. And I don't think it was that they didn't want to do the work. It was that they were stymied by the question, right? And then half of them came back and had really weird analysis, or got stuck on very, very small things. And then half of them would third half would just tear it up and do an awesome job.
Wow.
So that was a really good way for us to kind of separate out the people that had that ability to just put their hands on data. It's kind of like on a development team, you have people that just ship a lot of code and it's good code. And then you have people that really struggle to ship anything. It's kind of that, but it's in the data science world.
But you could also consider that some of those people went away and then died in a car crash.
Yeah, all of them probably.
Terrible. But does that demonstrate that I do ask the right questions about data? That potentially they passed away?
Absolutely.
Bryan, amazing. I feel like I can talk to you forever about this stuff. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks for being a crazy awesome member of 7 CTOs.
Oh, thank you. It's fun. We didn't go into that side of it, but I know. But I know I've been learning a ton in 7 CTOs.
No, that's awesome. I always love hearing when we talk about the stuff that sort of our day to day and our challenges. So you do run an event for founders and tech people called Startup Poker, right?
Yes. It's actually hosted by Daniel Marshalian mostly. So I did it for a couple of years. It's an awesome event. It's for founders and investors. Really, really good way to kind of get connected and network with a bunch of really high-quality founders.
Poker is a fun analytical game.
Fun thing, yeah.
Well, thank you, Bryan.
Awesome. Thanks for having me in.
Cheers. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to thectostudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or two for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.